So we've got this hugely laden pear tree and the elderberries right next door, and without walking more than a step or two, we've also got these blackcurrants and damsons right next door. Hello guys, Carl again from selfsufficienthub.com. I've come out for a midsummer walk. It is the tail end of July. It's very hot. It's 33 degrees here, which 33 degrees Celsius, which is very hot for us. And I've come across about 3 miles from my house. I've not been here before, not walking. And I've come across this magnificent tree here behind me, and it is by far my favourite tree for foraging, and that is the walnut tree. Juglans regia, I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but that is the official name, Juglans regia, and regia is the common walnut tree, and then you have Juglans nigra, which is the black walnut tree, which is slightly less common. The main difference between the common walnut tree and the black walnut tree is the leaves and the number and size of them. So the black walnut has less leaves and more in the clusters, whereas the common walnut tree tends to have around 5, but it can have 7 or 9. This one's got 7, you see, a couple back here. So the leaves are really the main way you tell it apart, and you can spot these from quite a distance. I quite often spot these from the car, these trees. Around this time of year, you can also spot them while you're traveling around by the actual fruit. So you can see the nuts here, and sometimes the trees become really laden with them, and they're really easy to spot. Once you've spotted the fruit once or twice, these nuts, you're going to be able to spot them easily every time. Now, you can harvest these nuts at 2 different times of year, and we're kind of caught between them. So if you get there early, you can harvest them very early before the shell, which this isn't. The shell is actually inside this green husk, but the shell in there, while it's still soft, you can harvest it at that point and pickle it with the shell still on. A lot of people do that for, pickled walnuts. They used to be a delicacy, and lots of people still eat them at Christmas. They're very, very expensive to buy. The other time you would harvest them is after the shell has hardened and the whole nut has ripened. And then you would see this outer husk start to split and reveal the shell inside. I've driven my knife into this and hit the hard shell, so we know that it's too late for pickling. And I'm going to just open it up now and show you that shell inside. So I've peeled a lot of this back, and as you can see, that there will become the brown shell that you're familiar with seeing around walnuts if you were to buy them in the supermarket at Christmas or whatever. And this one is suffering from leaf mite gall. Can you see that? That's the larvae of the walnut leaf mite that's causing that deformation in the leaf. A couple of things to say. If you peel them, they will stain your fingers, and it's not easy to get off. I'm gonna have that with me for a little while now. Doesn't bother me, I don't care. You might. If you do, then just bear that in mind. And the second thing is, you could take this home now and let it dry out, crack it at Christmas, and you'll get a little nut out of there. But they're going to be slightly more bitter the earlier you pick them, and a lot more work. So it's and smaller. So it's actually much better to leave them to get bigger. This nut will continue to grow on the tree, and that shell inside will become harder and harder, and eventually it will split this husk on the outside and it will fall away. And that's the best time to harvest them, really, if you want to eat them as nuts. Common walnut tree. So I'm just a few meters down the road from the walnut tree, and we've got these blackberries. It's quite early for blackberries, but there are loads about this year. We all know about blackberries. I'm not going to waste too much time on it, but there's one little tip that I really did want to tell you that's super helpful and changed my world. When you eat a blackberry, you're never really sure what you're going to get unless you've been to the bush before. Now that one was really tart. I'm not a big fan of tart blackberries. That's going to be the type it is. There's hundreds of different varieties of blackberries. And then here we are, just another few meters down the road, and we have what could be a completely different variety of blackberries. There's none here for me to try, and none quite ready yet. But what I'm trying to say is there's hundreds of different varieties, and just because you've seen a blackberry bush doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be perfect for you. So it's worth the time when you're out foraging to just try different blackberries from different areas and gradually build up a map of where the ones that are your favorites are growing, because whichever ones you prefer, it just seems silly not to be picking those when they're definitely out there, especially if you, over time, it's quite easy to develop a little map of where the blackberries you consider to be really good ones are growing. My son, he loves tart food, he loves sour food, he loves gooseberries before I can even eat them. So his favourite blackberries and my favourite blackberries come from two different bushes. I've just had a really exciting score. So I found a wild pear tree, and you can tell it's a pear tree because they're on the floor. They're soft. These windfall ones are soft, so it means that they're actually ripening. They're ripening much earlier than the ones we have at our house. So it means, hopefully, I'm gonna see if I can get hold of one and try it. If they're decent, it means I've just extended pear season by a good month, because these guys are clearly going to be ripening before ours, probably every year. So let's see if I can grab hold of one. Yeah, very mild, beautiful. Oh yeah, this find has made me a very happy boy. So there's quite a few on there that aren't ripe yet. You see, most of them are still green and quite small, but there's a few on there that have gone this lovely yellow colour. And for those of you wondering, just below it here, we have elder. I've done videos on elder already. We've got videos on elderberries, elderflowers, and the wood ear mushroom which grows on them, but these are elderberries and they're perfect for picking. I won't talk too much about them today because, as I say, I've done another video on them. The only thing I will say is all parts of the elder tree are toxic, including the berries, until you cook them. So just bear that in mind. There's lots of anecdotal evidence that lots of people have had the odd berry here and there while they've been walking around as kids foraging and as adults with no harmful effects. So they're not, deadly poisonous in tiny amounts, but they are considered toxic. So just bear that in mind. So we've got this hugely laden pear tree and the elderberries right next door. And without walking more than a step or two, we've also got these blackcurrants and damsons right next door. So damsons look quite similar to sloes to a lot of people. They're not the same fruit, and sloes grow on the blackthorn bush, which has got the big thorns on it. If you don't have thorns on it, you don't have sloes. In this tiny little area, we've got 4 incredible forageables just all within 10 meters, within 5 meters of each other. So I'm going to harvest some of these pears now and then carry on. That little cluster there is where I was talking to you about the pears, and there's blackberries all along this hedge, along with some more elders. But just here, just like I say, a few meters across from that last patch, we've now got hawthorn. These here are haws, Haws. Now these leaves here aren't from the hawthorn. These leaves are from a different plant that is growing right next to it. So down here it's easier for me to show you the leaves because they're separated from that other bush that's intertwined with it. And when these berries go a deep red, that's when you would harvest them. And then if you pop them in the freezer for a night, then that's going to effectively sweeten them and make them much tastier. The alternative is to leave them for a frost. But yeah, just pop them in the freezer and that will sweeten them. And they taste a little bit like, a bit appley. And they're great for jams and things like that. We've struck quite a rich vein of hedge. So we're just a few meters up the road from the pear tree section, and we've already hit another really great crop. We've got lots and lots of these damsons, and they're really quite squidgy, which means they're just right for picking. Now, damsons basically look like tiny little plums. Apart from the size, one of the ways you tell the difference is that damsons are generally all the way around without that crease, whereas there's a rhyme you can remember to tell the difference. Plums have bums, so when you see that line down, that's a plum. So within 50 meters, we've had pears, elder, blackcurrant, damsons, I'm sure a couple of others. There's also been Hawthorn in there, which I couldn't really get a decent video of, and rose hips. So just an incredibly productive little part of the countryside. Just sat out here waiting for people to discover its bounty. And now we have sloes. So sloes grow on the blackthorn bush, and sloes and damsons are quite often mistaken for each other. The easiest way to tell the difference is the thorns. So on the blackthorn, it gets its name because it has lots and lots of those. There's lots and lots of those thorns. Can you see that there? Sloes are generally quite small, smaller than damsons, but otherwise they can look quite similar. They start off green and go blue, and they're used as a flavouring really. People make sloe gin out of them. I personally don't drink, so I never forage for sloes. I don't really have a use for them. Anything I can do with sloes, I can do, for me, in my opinion, a better version of it with other things, because they're not a particularly sweet fruit to my taste, but lots of people like them. So there you go, some sloes. So if you find these videos valuable, there's several ways you can support them, and the easiest of which is to subscribe to our channel. Press that like button and leave us a comment down below. We do love hearing from you, and I personally respond to every comment that I read. You can also find us on Facebook just by searching Self-Sufficient Hub, and you can find our podcast as well, which drops every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, where I talk about all things self-sufficiency. So hopefully I'll see you around.